Hundreds of protesters shut down an Atlanta highway after a black man is shot and killed by police. It was all caught on police body cam. We want to warn you, this footage could be disturbing. Watch.
Here, put your hands behind your back. Hey, stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! You're gonna get tased! You're gonna get tased! Stop! 63.
Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed at a fast food restaurant after reportedly grabbing an officer's taser. Protesters lighting the Wendy's restaurant on fire where Brooks was killed.
The officer who shot Brooks, Garrett Rolfe, now fired from the force. Atlanta's police chief resigned from the department less than 24 hours after the shooting. Welcome, everyone, to the 6 a.m. hour of Fox and Friends. Here with Griff Jenkins, Pete Hegseth. We're going to be covering the latest of the Atlanta shooting that we just spoke a bit about, as well as what's been going on the ground in Seattle.
That's right. The shooting happened on Friday night. The protests and the lighting of the Wendy's on fire happened last night. And, of course, the firing of the police chief, or resigning of the police chief. We're going to bring in Ted Williams, Fox News contributor and former D.C. homicide detective, to weigh in this morning. Ted, good morning. Thank you for joining the program. I watched a lot of this footage. And, you know, the police were called to this Wendy's because there was a man reportedly stopped in his car. They found out he was intoxicated. They asked him to get out of the vehicle. Initially, it was not resisting arrest. Then it quickly became that. He grabbed an officer's taser. There was a confrontation. He ran, shots fired. Ted, your reaction in looking at the tape of what happened?
Well, you know, guys, good morning to you all.
Good morning.
What we have, unfortunately, Atlanta, Georgia, a city that's on fire externally and internally. And when I say that, I think what I've seen in looking at the video here and then looking at the response by the city, I think that Mayor Lance Bottom may have acted precipitously in terminating one officer and putting another officer on leave before the investigation was completed. What happens in these situations normally is that there is an investigation. The officers are normally put on administrative leave, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigations that's conducting this investigation would issue a report, and then the mayor would act. But it's my understanding that the mayor of Atlanta is on a short list to be the running mate as the vice president for the Biden committee. And so therefore, I'm deeply concerned. But I think what our viewers must understand is that a police officer can use deadly force when there's a fleeing felon. And if that police officer believes that his life or the life of others are in danger, he can use deadly force.
But you know, Ted, you and I were, in full disclosure, texting a lot last night because, remember, the call came for an individual sleeping in his car in a drive-through, and then even though Brooks appears to turn the gun, which is a taser, and fire at him, there's space. They're giving chase now. Different than perhaps the force that would have been used had they still been wrestling. So as you and I have over these years have gone in and looked at the use of force, was it appropriate, or has politics played too big of a role in this decision?
Well, this is the $64,000 question as to why the decision was made so precipitously. You're right, Griff. You and I have covered many of these scenarios and situations around the country. And in this situation, the question of whether deadly force was used properly should have been left up to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and it was not. And as a result of that, we had people out on the highway, protesters out on the highway. We had the Wendy's on fire. We have gas stations right in that area, and it's a very unfortunate situation.
You know, Ted, did authorities perhaps respond so quickly in terms of punishing the officer because there was a perception that in the case of George Floyd, by many, myself included, like many people were saying, why did it take so long to hold these officers accountable? Why did it take 5 days? When I looked at this video, truthfully, it looked to me like police panicked, and I watched it from several different angles. And I understand that Rayshard resisted arrest. I understand that he failed a sobriety test. I understand that he ran and pointed a taser at a police officer. These are all things that obviously you should not do. But police are trained for these situations, and their job is to not use deadly force in cases where someone is not using deadly force against them. So when I look at it, that's my perception. Could that have possibly led the authorities to make this charge quickly in combination with this perception that in the case of George Floyd, there was a delay that the public did not take to very well?
Well, it could very well have led to that, Jed, but I got to tell you, you also have to look at this in the eyes of a law enforcement officer. Remember, they're tussling with this guy, they're wrestling with this guy. The guy has now got their taser. He's running, they're running after him. Their adrenaline is flowing. He turns around, he fires at them, and one of the officers fire back. I don't know at this stage whether that was reasonable or not, but I think you have to let the facts and the investigation play out to make that determination. I don't think, and again, you can react if you're the mayor, but why not put the person on leave pending the outcome of the investigation? You gotta wonder about morale in the Atlanta, Georgia Police Department. Too many times, just 2 weeks ago, 4 officers were fired. And I think sometimes you may be acting, but perhaps maybe overreacting, unfortunately.
Yeah, Ted, you're right. You have to put yourself in the shoes of that officer who doesn't know. There's so much uncertainty. They are afraid. They want to go home. They don't want this confrontation. There's a resisting of arrest. And in the context larger, Ted, of the defund the police movement, there's a ton of scrutiny right now. Seattle's one of those places as well. As you know, there's Chaz, which has changed its name now, we're told, and there are protests there. Well, there were counter-protesters in support of the police yesterday, Ted, and one of those protesters, we've got video of it, was carrying an American flag, at which point she was confronted, yelled at, which is part of protest, but then that happened. The flag is stolen, taken away. What is it about carrying a flag in the country today that would be an affront to Black Lives Matter or anyone who's taking on the police right now?
The bottom line is there's absolutely nothing that's going on in our country that should have us demeaning the flag of the United States of America, and specifically in Seattle, Washington. But I got to tell you guys, Seattle, Washington is just completely out of control, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. You got the chief of police, Chief Carmen Best. She's at odds now with the mayor. Why? Because she's seen demonstrators come into an area of Seattle there and take over a police precinct. And these demonstrators are having parties, they're eating pizza, they're doing movies, and they're now making demands that are just unrealistic. They want, for instance, the police department to be disbanded. Not only are they asking for the police department to be disadvantaged, they're asking for free education. Just a lot of things that should not be happening. And I can tell you, this is not going to play out well. It's not going to get better. They're going to have to, meaning the governor and the state police and perhaps maybe even the National Guard, they're going to have to go in Seattle and bring that back under control.
Yeah, Ted, you talk about the protesters and the demands they're making. Here is a short clip of some of the unusual demands we're seeing. Listen.
I want you to find by the time you leave this autonomous zone, I want you to give $10 to one African-American person from this autonomous zone. If you have a hard time giving up $10, you got to think about, are you really down with this struggle? Are you really down with the movement? Because if that is a challenge for you, then I'm unsure if you're in the right place.
Now, Ted, I chuckled at it, but it's serious in the sense of how is that possibly helping bring any sort of solution to racial injustice, which is such an important thing to address today?
Griff, let's be very realistic. What is going on in Seattle is a movement within itself. It has nothing to do with the death of George Floyd. What is going on is that individuals have their own agendas, and they've now taken over the city. They've taken over these blocks in the city, and something should have been done initially. And the longer this go on in Seattle, you can take it to the bank that there are going to be more people injured in trying to bring about change in that area. When I say bring about change, I mean simply getting control of that area. It is out of control. The mayor is clearly wrong here. These are not just peaceful protesters. The chief of police is, like I said, is at odds with the mayor. The chief of police would like to send her people in there and take over. And here again, you're looking at a morale problem in the police department, where police officers see where they're being disrespected. Their precinct is being disrespected. Their city is being disrespected. This just cannot continue to go on in that city.
Yeah. Yeah, Ted, and the obvious fear is that, you say we need to get the situation under control in Seattle. Many agree. The fear is hopefully that it will not escalate into violence when that happens, because at some point the police are going to need to say, listen, you can't just set up an autonomous zone where we're unable to get to people within that zone who may be reporting crimes that they need our help dealing with. So this remains to be seen. Hopefully it doesn't escalate into violence. But we really appreciate you being here to weigh in on all this, as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Ted.